Good evening, everyone. The personal driver for reputed crime boss John Gotti has been shot to death. Police say it looks like a mob rub-out.
Now there are questions about whether the killing may be a challenge to Gotti's authority. As Brenda Blackman reports, the victim was shot 5 times in the back of the head.
It looks very much, by the style and the circumstances, to be an organized crime hit.
Police confirmed today that the body of 47-year-old Bartholomew Bob Boriello was discovered by his nephew about 7:30 last night next to his Lincoln Town Car in the driveway of his Bay 29th Street home in Bensonhurst. He had been shot several times as he got out of his car. Police could confirm little else. Boriello is identified by other authorities as the personal driver of reputed mob boss John Gotti and a member of the Gambino crime family believed to be headed by Gotti.
You know, there's a lot of different pictures of you, with John and going to the courthouse and that sort of thing. There's a picture in there with you're standing behind Bobby Boriello. It's in the intro. I've got that picture right there. I wanted to ask you about him. What was your relationship with him, and what did John think of him as well?
John loved the guy. I was pretty close with him. We were good friends, and Junior loved him. He was very, very close to Junior. And that was, that's that way of life. That's that life. You're here today, and in the way they killed him by his house, and it was just it was crazy. And when I do the look back, like anybody could be killed. It didn't matter how close you were to anybody. I was young then, and I really was deluded to the fact that everybody was in such fear of John and had such great respect for him. But me, his son, Jackie knows, any of us could have been killed at any time, and life would have went on. Yeah, maybe John would have killed the guy that killed one of us, but I'm old now and wiser, and I realize that there's no respect in the life, and at any time you could be eliminated or be killed. And everybody will go to the funeral. Oh, what a great guy. Oh, what a shame. And then tomorrow, just life goes on. But, now when I do the look back and I see how they, they gas pipe took out Boriello. And I remember being on the visit and seeing and visiting with John the next day. And it was a pretty quiet visit, but, just like, life went on, and I guess that's how it is in the mob. Junior was very affected by his death, very, very affected. And so was Senior to a degree, but, life goes on. Hey, Jess, you see this thing in here from the King's Son, 714?
Let's check it out.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement. Could you read that?
The King's Son. It's 1988. You're on a train headed to work. You hear people on the train saying they just heard John Gotti was killed that morning. What is your next move? Do you go to work? Are you in danger?
So the King's Son, that's a hypothetical question because obviously John didn't get killed. But if I was to answer that question in the hypothetical, I would have to say, what's my next move? I would look for Junior and see what our next move is at that point. But yeah, I would think that the people closest to John at that point would be in danger. Do I go to work? I don't know. I probably go to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, or go to Junior, or go find Junior, or Jackie knows and see what's up. But now that I look back, Jackie would have fell into line with who was in charge. Junior, of course, that's blood. That's his father. So I guess to go back to that question, I would have had to rely on Junior to find out what the reality is. But people like D'Amico or Scars, they just go on, and who's the next boss? Who's running the show now? Okay, we love him now. Now I realize that.
Yeah.
That's a good question, the King's Son. Excellent question.
Well, that goes back to what you just said about John's reaction to Bobby Boriello being taken out. You know, it's kind of business as usual. You know, it's a cold existence. You know, it's kind of a normal everyday thing. You know, so and so's gone, and you know who's collecting his money. You know, and the it keeps rolling. You know, it keeps going on.
You know, who's taking over his stuff? But when I look back at it now, think of the balls that Gas Pipe had to have to take Boriello out.
Yeah.
You know, because my whole thing was John was so feared, and I mean feared, but there's always somebody, you know, there's always that one person that you never would expect. But you do the look back and you look at that Lucchese family. They were treacherous, 10 times worse than Genovese. They were just treacherous people up until the end. Liars. They were snakes. You could not do business with that Lucchese family. And as years went by, it only got worse, you know, with that Joe Caridi and that whole group. Just bad. Legitimate people could not be involved with them.
Yeah. Well, you yourself had connections with the Lucchese family. Is that right?
Well, I had connections to the extent that my friend Phil Basile, who was a close associate with Paul Vario, who was a very strong captain in the Lucchese family. But Vario, with Jimmy Burke and John Gotti, they were very, very close. And once Vario died, the other people started to abuse Phil Basile. You know, Phil Basile was the nightclub guy all over Long Island, all over. And they were abusing him. And it just goes to show you, you know, you look, it's all the same, Jesse. You know, you look at the guy, Hal Irving from Crystal Geyser. That was Jackie's guy. Jackie's gone now. Hal's gone now. Who knows who's being abused there? You look at Carl Lizzer Industries. He's getting abused. Well, he's dead. So it's just, if you were John Gotti, you weren't abused. He was a very unusual boss. Very unusual. Like I said, you made a deal with him, that was the deal. He wasn't looking for 5 cents more. You know, he was very unusual for a boss. You know, Castellano would take the gold out of your teeth.